That's cinema, baby.
No, Mr. Wilson. I don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone.
That's right, you don't. How about going outside and trying to kick me around?
I'm not supposed to fight with the guests, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a guest tonight, you yellow bastard. I happen to be an intruder.
Hello, and welcome to The Good, the Pod, and the Ugly, a film podcast where we pair movies to garner/gather a better understanding of the filmographies of notable directors or actors, typically one artist/person/creator per season. Often with guests, I'm your co-host, Ken. How was that?
That's pretty good.
Should we do another take?
No, go with it.
I guess I'm your third co-host, Thomas.
And I'm your other co-host, Ken. You may know us from our sponsor, the app PanScan. Like Letterboxd, but we keep out the dumb shits. Has this ever happened to you? You rewatch Lethal Weapon 2 because your internet is down and the PS4 won't play your Blu-ray of The Killing, so you put Lethal Weapon 2 on, fall asleep through most of it, but see enough and hear enough that when you're awoken by your 40-pound stupid fucking dog laying on your chest like you're going to die, but you see enough of the movie to know it is lazy, cynical, and profoundly stupid, and you go onto Letterboxd full of frothy, righteous cinematic anger only to be confronted by some fucking patron of the app whose review reads, okay, this is peak cinema. Love this flick. Without a trace of irony, with 373 likes, and suddenly your froth simmers to ice, and you scroll through a few more things like, not gonna lie, had a good time with it. Like they took it out for a date, and the movie gave him a hand job while they parked under the old abandoned Hardee's sign on the outskirts of town. Well, good news. At PanScan, we filter out the fucking movie idiots by using a brilliantly written series of 3,124 questions meant to read the dummies. And no patrons whose simian views are elevated because they throw us a little cash. Fuck that. PanScan at the App Store now.
Wow, Ken. I am very sorry your internet was down and you weren't able to jerk off for a week. On this podcast, we do a deep dive on the creatives' paired films and their backgrounds, adding our own insights. We started the first 3 seasons with Clint Eastwood, but, I'm going to throw this one to Jack. Who are we talking about this season? And what films are we watching this week?
Sir Christopher Nolan. And this week we're watching Batman Begins, which is the first of his Batman trilogy, and I think y'all are also doing Interstellar.
That is correct.
And as we've been joined previous weeks, we're here with Ryan.
Hello.
Woo! Still our probationary third host.
I didn't know it was probationary. We didn't discuss.
Well, when
I
Jack's
don't
around,
remember.
you get kicked down to fourth host.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's as it should be. Have you guys? Did you know that he is beginning? It's Batman. He's beginning.
Yeah, begging strips.
Okay, so Interstellar and Batman Begins, both movies,
Yes.
have a Thomas.
Ooh.
Again.
Yeah.
Thomas is in his movies.
They both have a Michael Caine. They both have a Hans Zimmer score. They have Crowley doing design, which this is the first time for both of those, right? For Crowley to come on and Hans Zimmer. Both have bad gases. Because of nitrogen in the Dust Bowl, right? And, hallucinogens. Both have an ice fight, which I fucking love. But both actually are in Iceland. And when they were doing the scouting for Interstellar, the tour guide called the glacier that they were going to the Batman Glacier from Batman Begins.
Wow.
In both movies, the hero wears a protective suit. And both, the hero uncovers a secret society, NASA, right? Okay.
Uh-huh.
For a director who operates at maybe like 10% humor levels, these might be his most comedic films. Memento gets bigger laughs probably in the theater, but I would say of his films, these might be his funniest. Oh, a protagonist returns to his childhood house and it actually gets rebuilt.
Ooh.
Both have stowaways because Bruce Wayne jumps onto a freighter to go to Asia land to do crimes. to learn the mind of a criminal. Both have a protagonist that sleeps for many days. Both have a dad who dies during the film. Both have a child who gets a present because that kid on the fire escape, his parents he gives him the bat periscope, whatever that is. Hey, someone has a birthday in both films, and then someone who doesn't normally get to drive a car gets really excited about driving another person's vehicle, and when they do so, the protagonist can stop another vehicle from going where it wants to go.
Whoa.
Neither has director commentary on the second disc of its physical media releases. And both, a secret passage of sorts behind a wall leads to where the protagonist retreats to fulfill his mission.
Whoa.
Holy shit. Well done, Thomas.
I mean, it's going to be hard for me to keep them separate, to be honest.
Yeah, Interstellar is pretty much, he said, you know what, I need to do that movie right. I'm going to remake it.
So yeah, Batman Begins, 2005. Did you all guys see this in theaters? Were you alive at this time, Jack?
I was way too young to see this.
You would have been 1.5, I think, when this movie came out.
And I was probably way too young when I watched it for the first time anyway, because it scared the shit out of me. But
yeah. Only 1.5, but Bryan Singer still wanted to take him to it.
That's funny.
There you go. The Bryan Singer jokes never get old. I saw it opening weekend. How about you guys?
I believe I did too.
Yeah, I was in grad school, but made the effort to go see this. And on the big screen. I did not watch Alone in the Dark on the big screen, which also came out in 2005. Nor Lord of War, nor War of the Worlds, nor Munich.
Did you see Alone in the Dark? The Bowl?
Didn't we all watch that? Wait, did we cover that on the podcast?
Yeah, these are all movies we covered on the podcast. I wasn't just randomly saying things that came out.
Which one is Alone in the Dark? I don't
You've seen Alone in the Dark.
Did I?
Yeah.
I definitely saw the Spielbergs in the theater.
Me too. And I was as we've mentioned before, in his two first not major, but releases, people knew him by Memento and Insomnia. I'd seen both of those. And I was really excited that they were throwing the Batman IP to a guy who was a writer and a great director already. And I thought it was interesting. I think nowadays when that happens, it's kind of the norm that the studio process has been churning these directors up and spitting them out. And I think Nolan is a fascinating case of kind of taking it and maybe even doing the opposite.
Well, it also seems like Nolan had they hadn't matured into the IP, whatever this is. Live in.
Can you just recall a time when you heard that they were making a superhero movie and you were excited? You were like, "Oh, Batman, Nolan, awesome!" Like when you were talking about that, Ken, that was hard for me to go back in time and imagine.
Yeah, but it was exciting because Thomas, like you said, we hadn't come into the IP age where that became the most important thing. That they were still looking of ways to creatively use these IP characters, and they were giving them to interesting directors who had either an affinity or a vision for the project.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same year, and we'll talk about it maybe in the reaction portion, because I have a take from another person who's not going to be on the podcast from a book I read about Superman Returns, but that's also around this same time. And it's also a phrase that multiple sources that I encountered this week doing some research on the movie, Nolan said the idea of like a reboot wasn't really a term at the time.
Yeah.
And so this is, I guess, a newish idea. I guess whenever you start to have a little bit more things canonical or coming out within a short period of time from each other, it starts, I guess that term makes a little bit more sense.
And he's such a big fan of the James Bond movies and how those kind of became different things with each subsequent actor. That he probably didn't see it as a reboot, but just as a different version of the same character, different style.
Yeah.
I mean, basically the Burdens were exactly the same as the Schumachers, so I could see that this would be a reboot. perfect handoff between those two.
Mhm.
I know the internet wasn't really around at the time, and there was like dinosaurs walking around and stuff in 2005. But were people like sick of Batman, or
No,
what was the
No.
general?
this was very exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the Schumachers, for like me, I was a fan who grew
Of
up
the
with
Schumachers?
the Frank. Yes, of the Frank Miller books, and the Batman Renaissance of the '80s, and there was a sense that Tim Burton maybe was close to something, and it was the idea that they were going to come close to make giving you the same feeling you had when you read the great Batman comics of the '70s and '80s.
Yeah, I feel like and I was 10 or whatever, but I feel like the Burtman Batmans, particularly the first one, was like people liked it, but it was also a little too Burton-y to be a really as huge as obviously Nolan made the Batman stuff.
Well, I think there's a little bit of nostalgia or rewriting of history there, because the first one, absolutely, especially with like Prince doing his own album for that, and I guess Michael Jackson was supposed to do the other half of it. One was going to be from the persona of Batman, and the one from Joker. Amazing stuff, right? But the second one's what? Batman Returns, the one with Michelle Pfeiffer and DeVito. That movie actually didn't do as well, even though it looks interesting. It's, I would say, batshit. It's guano. It's pretty crazy, but also it was too risque, I think, for the studio, which is why they ended up going with Schumacher and going even more popcorny, Adam Westy with the movies.
That's what my dad was hoping to see in 1989 was Michael Keaton hamming it up. So the Schumacher thing made sense to him, if nobody else.
In retrospect, the Burton movies do not seem that far from the Adam West TV show, just with a very huge budget and played straight, almost like the Naked Gun movies.
Particularly Batman Returns, which I like quite a bit.
Yeah, me too. It's a mess, but it is great to look at.
Yeah, that guy rides around on a giant fucking rubber ducky. What could be better? Like, can you imagine?
Weird. God.
He's such a tragic character, but we're here to talk about Batman Begins, not 1997's Batman and Robin. Hey, we're gonna pause for a moment. I need to figure out why can you guys hear my dog barking?
Yeah.
Can you hear our dogs barking?
Roscoe's a huge fan of the.
Are you guys' dogs barking at each other?
They're barking from like miles away.
The barking is coming from inside the house.
He fucked like 10,000 people? Or he claimed to fuck 10,000 people?
Roscoe?
Incredible.
My dog?
No, Joel Schumacher, your buddy. I like him too. It's not just you, Thomas. Wait,
you fucked 10,000 people?
In the excerpt of the book that I read, I think he wrote an autobiography, or maybe it was just a long interview. He was like talking about like you get up, and you do it with the person that you woke up with, and then you go to work and you're going to do it with somebody there, and then there's a lunchtime.
Okay, back on track. 97 Schumacher's fucking everything that walks, makes Batman and Robin, which had 11 Golden Raspberry nominations. But he did have a thought, and I think some of that, in his defense, was a lot of the notes from the studio and this need to have stars in your film and this need for Mattel type toys that roll off of it. He had an idea for a third movie. I don't know if you guys knew about this. It was going to be a darker movie.
Yeah.
It's called Batman Triumphant. Wow. And no, Jack, this isn't like the third Eastwood Ape movie. This is legit. And they were supposed to have a character that we see in this film, the Scarecrow.
Uh-huh.
And do we know who was supposed to play him? Nicolas Cage.
Wow.
Whoa.
So instead, what happens is you get, we talked a little bit about this last season, Aronofsky working with Frank Miller to try and develop a Batman Year One, where like Alfred's a mechanic maybe, and like just retooling the whole thing, making it maybe a little bit more realistic, but definitely a lot more maybe street level.
Yeah. Almost an Elseworlds type reimagining of it.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more steampunk. And in the meantime, this is we're in a part of Sir Christopher Nolan's career where he doesn't actually have anything lined up. I mean, this is unusual because right after the following, as soon as he puts it into Baby Ski Resort Film Festival, Slam Dance, he already has the script for Memento ready to shop around. And as soon as he's finishing up Memento, he's being offered Insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
And when he finishes Insomnia, he doesn't really have anything. And so while he's doing the press tour for Insomnia, he's trying to write a Howard Hughes biography.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey's attached, the Riddler himself.
Wow.
And they're working on it together. And the curse of Howard Hughes hits. This Howard Hughes story was going to be like his later part of his life where he's wearing like, I don't know, Kleenex boxes for shoes and has long fingernails and is eating whatever weird ice cream flavor that he buys after he bought the hotel and has him stock the freezer, right? Like this is deep into like the end of his life craziness that Nolan wants to capture. And some motherfucker by the name of Michael Mann is developing a movie called The Aviator that stars DiCaprio as a fun-loving Howard Hughes. Mann would go off to make his masterpiece, Collateral, leaving the film to Scorsese. That was not a joke. And so Scorsese makes Aviator, and it has our man, Sir Christopher Nolan, looking around for something to do. Talks to Warner Brothers, and he's like, what do you guys got? Kind of knowing the Batman's out there. And he says, well, you know, why don't I take a crack at Batman? What he does, and it's an interesting like note for people, is he decides that he's going to try to make it as realistic as possible. But before he goes to the studio with anything, he's going to work with somebody to create the full design and have the script ready. Because he says, like, as soon as you go to the studio and come at it with only 80% of the idea, things just go out of control. They want to make it, and things get out of your hands. Like the studio takes over at that point, and the machine starts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so he didn't want that to happen. He had done enough that he was like, "Oh, I know that that's a thing, and I'm going to forestall that by working on creating the full look and the full script before we even go in there." He says, like, you're encouraged in a big movie to very rapidly hire an enormous amount of people, artists, concept guys, all this stuff. Then you have to feed the beast. And so you're in a situation where you go, I need a robot for the science fiction film. Figure me out a robot. And then all of a sudden you're doing whatever they feel like and come back when they come back with a robot, which wasn't even my suit of working at all. Not to talk anything about the next film. But yeah, he's like, he has this wherewithal because it's not his first rodeo that he needs to come at this with a fully formed concept, which is what he does.
And so he worked directly with it's Goyer, right? That he co-wrote it with.
Yeah, I mean, Goyer wrote 1.5 drafts, is what he said, and then he went off to do Blade Trinity to direct it. And so, no, it's not. It doesn't star Carrie-Anne Moss. Different Trinity. It's a third in the Blade series.
It's the best of the three.
I'd say it's a good superhero movie. But yeah, Goya, they called it, I can't remember what they called it, like the Deception Game or something. They had it under tight wraps because, they didn't want people to know that he was working on a Batman film until they were ready to start putting it fully into production.
Amazing.
And he said the hardest thing was it felt like they were making two different movies, which I think we'll get to, because you have the origin story and then you have everything that happens once the manor burns down, and they reverse engineered a lot of things ahead of time to really work through, like, how are we going to design the costume? Like, what's the functionality of all these different things, and how are we going to explain it away in the film?
Yeah, it's a fascinatingly designed and structured and made movie. A lot to admire and a lot to scratch your head at, for sure.
It's mostly, I remember from the first time seeing it, just the first, I guess, using your description, Thomas, which I think is a good one, the origin story portion of the movie. I mean, that thing moves like nothing else. It's so propulsive, and you never even stop to catch your breath until he's totally established. It's a really great, particularly with all the backstory and everything that rather the backstory meaning his parents' death. He just glosses over that in the most tertiary fashion, but it feels like he's giving it good attention and the respect it deserves.
But when he does so, he also does so not by having him go watch a Zorro movie, which is interesting, which is what the comic books say. And then I don't remember what Zack Snyder does. He does some bullshit movie. Rather,
Zorro
Faust.
the Gay Blade.
But so the idea of like him going to watching Zorro is that's where he gets the idea to put a mask on.
Right.
Yeah.
Nolan's version and Goyer's version, he goes to watch Faust, and then it's the idea of the bats that cause him like get this anxiety, this panic attack, which has his dad, Thomas Wayne, take him out to the back area, which is when they get mugged. And so it's a small change, but it's a change in the service of like fully thinking through this full, like every step of the film versus just doing service to the comic books.
Yeah, it's brilliant to make Bruce feel guilty for his parents' death. It's so simple too. It's such a simple story change, but they talk through it to come up with it, and it's so important to not just this movie, but all three of the movies of Bruce Wayne's little character journey he takes.
I'm not too excited that we're going to be talking about a Batman movie from here until the end of the end of the season.
Yeah, good point. Also, the thing that altering the backstory does, Thomas, is introduce another chance for Nolan to get at the changing the past to change the future scenario. Bruce is traumatized as a young boy first by the bats, and then he's re-traumatized by the bats, and he associates that with his parents' death. And the way he becomes a hero is he goes back and he alters his view of bats and of darkness and of all the things that he was scared of to make him transcend, the bonds of humanity.
The first 45 minutes of this movie, I think, is about as good as I don't want to say origin, but I guess it is of any of the superhero movies that they've made, because he tells so much and uses what we already know and then changes enough. But doing his timey-wimey timeline thing crams in a lot. He crams in almost 2 movies worth of plot, but it all feels organic and it all feels emotionally satisfying and of a whole, and not just an anecdote that sets up the main story, but everything has to do with the main story.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that watching it this time surprised me, was to see how many jumps he has back and forth between childhood and young adulthood as he's going through the League of Shadows.
Yeah, and that's just really in the first act, and the first act of this movie is pretty amazing, and every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, why don't I like this one that much again? And then as soon as it gets linear, I'm like, oh yeah, it's
and as soon as a certain DA shows up.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So what Nolan says, and this is a quote from the Nolan Variations book by Tom Schoen, which I've talked about before. But he says, everything we did was about being in massive denial that there was such a thing as a comic book movie. And I think we're all there until it becomes a comic book movie in the last half. Yeah. But kid, we're talking about the plot.
Oh,
we don't even have a synopsis yet.
Oh yeah, I got a doozy for you all today. Like a celebrity guest wrote one for me.
Oh,
yeah. So
wait, is it Pacino from The Scarecrow?
Oh, I wish I could do Pacino's voice, but I would lose my voice like Christian Bale did while he was making this movie if I did Pacino for an entire synopsis.
Yeah.
Instead, it may be a very objectionable New Zealand accent. I apologize. So Peter Jackson, who's a big fan of the podcast, obviously dropped me a line knowing that we were doing Nolan Void, and he loves Nolan, they're buddies. And he was like, love to do a synopsis of Batman Baggins. And I said, begins. And I corrected him. And then he started telling me the synopsis like I was telling him to begin. It was good. But like, what do we pay? What do we give some guy who has that much money? And isn't he like busy? He's like, making another Kiwi Middle Earth movie, Ken. Hunt for the Wilder People. I said, wasn't that already a movie? He goes, pardon me, I meant Hunt for Gollum or Smeagol or some fat wad of cash. All I want is payment, is inclusion in your next 4x4 and some of that juicy Terry Richardson memorabilia you have. So I said, deal. I sent him 2 sexy late-era Terry Richardson prints of some melted cheese on a granite basement floor next to wood paneling, and he was delighted. And this is the synopsis he sent me. I'm going to do it in my accent because it would be really annoying otherwise.
Oh, thank God.
Okay. In the land of Gothamshire, a young Bilbo Baggins lives a quiet life until his mother and father are killed by a wraith beast because hard times and economic disparity. Bilbo journeys out into Middle-earth in order to find out how to come back and save Gothamshire by learning how to punch, kick, and roll some wicked pipeweed in foreign prisons. He is recruited in the Freezy Wheezy lands by the enigmatic figure of Raz Al Dwarf. Raz, the leader of the League of Shadows, sees potential in Bilbo and urges him to embrace his destiny as protector of Gothamshire. Only a master of the pipeweed can protect it, Liam Neeson, as Raz says. Oh shit, bro, that's me, Bilbo says, under the influence of the special Freezy Wheezy Lands pipeweed, which, spoiler, will later be used to destroy all of Gothamshire. Reluctantly, Bilbo agrees to join Raz and his league of ninja dwarves, who train him in the ways of combat and stealth. Under their guidance, Bilbo transforms into a formidable warrior, able to power through pipeweed highs to still concentrate and fight, but he soon discovers the true nature of Raz's plan to destroy Gothamshire in order to rebuild it from the ashes of total pipeweed destruction. Disillusioned, Bilbo abandons the League and returns to Gothamshire, where he adopts the persona of the masked vigilante known as Batman Baggins. With the help of his trusted allies, including Gandalf the White, played by Michael Caine, and Gandalf the Person of Color, played by Morgan Freeman, Bilbo sets out to cleanse Gothamshire of corruption and crime. Facing off against foes like Scarecrow and the heavy ale boss Carmine Falcone, Bilbo navigates the treacherous underworld while struggling to maintain his moral compass. Along the way, he forms alliances with the dedicated ranger James Gordon and the idealistic district attorney Rachel DeWet Blanket, played by Katie Holmes. When lifelong friend Bilbo expresses his rage at the judicial system gone rotten, Rachel is like, oh my God, totally, like, so rotten. I wouldn't make banana bread with it. Also, carbs. As the city plunges into chaos, Bilbo confronts Raz Al Dwarf and his League of Shadows in a climactic battle for the soul of the Gothamshire. You smoke pipeweed just like your father, Raz taunts him, until Bilbo smirks and uses his pipe to blow up Raz in a monorail. Wait, there's a monorail in this movie? Dude. Anyway, with each of his heroic alliances as Batman Baggins encouraging him, Bilbo goes to Rachel for the same, and she says, I can't even think of Middle Earth right now. I went to Pilates, and my core is middle sore. Oh my God, did you know I was like a lawyer? I have briefs, but that's crazy because they're like underwear. With courage and determination, Bilbo ignores Rachel and emerges victorious, saving the Shire from destruction and earning the respect of the citizens. But the struggle is far from over, as new threats loom on the horizon, and Bilbo realizes that his journey as the Dark Knight has only just begun. Mark Wahlberg should have played Bruce's dad, so he would have killed those bats with a flamethrower. Bruce would have become the flamer. If I did Batman, there'd be shit all over the floors of Wayne Manor. So from here, it's just like 4 more pages of Peter Jackson spitballing his version of Batman, and that's his synopsis. Thank you, Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
I was going to say it would be really stupid for him to use his real last name as part of his superhero identity, but then I realized Nolan literally does that in the 3rd movie with the Robin character. So it would actually fit in.
It all comes together. Yeah.
No,
Brilliant.
thank you, Peter Jackson, the creator of Meet the Feebles and maybe some other films.
Which ones would we do on a 4x4? We'd have to do
Brain Dead.
Dead Alive.
Feebles, Dead Alive. Wait, that's the same thing.
Heavenly Creatures.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
and Lovely Bones.
Woo! 4x5.
Never seen Lovely Bone.
It's great. It's not. Mark Wahlberg's in it though. Liam Neeson has so the best part of this movie, I think, having watched all these Nolans, is I really feel he, as I like to say, directs the fuck out of it. Because there are sequences and interactions between characters that really feel like they're from a 90s superhero movie. But he has fucking, not fucking, they're not fucking. He has Liam Neeson, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, Tom Wilkinson, all these fucking great actors. And when they spit out this dialogue, it is glorious.
Yeah.
They sell it. And then, Katie Holmes shows up and it's like a record scratch, but hey, whatever. He recast her for a reason, I guess. This might be his best movie as director, overcoming the shortcomings of the script.
Well, that's my big brain Nolan theory, is that his movies are mostly a collection of really cool sounding one-liners that if you stop to think about them are really stupid.
Yeah.
But he never gives you the opportunity to stop to think about them, because like the like Harvey Dent's first scene in The Dark Knight, I know we're not talking about that movie, but it's so him, the gun, you better buy American if you want to kill me. It's so dumb, but he just immediately moves on to the next scene. And so this movie especially is just him continuously doing that.
Uh-huh.
Nice coat.
That's
Wait, that bum's still hanging out there in your coat? Okay.
What?
Can we
You
talk
recognize it?
It'd be funny if they switched to the next scene of Batman had him wearing the old coat, and then it cut to the bum with the Batman wings.
He just keeps trading. It's like a magpie.
Can we talk about the voice and the whole overarching theme about heroes and villains and becoming a legend? I have always found, one thing I found interesting about this series, the Batman movies, is people really like these movies, but then when you talk about the overarching theme of this series, it's like, oh, there's a reason for the voice, is kind of the... So I'm wondering if you guys think that comes across throughout the movies and in this movie, and everybody makes fun of the voice, I think. Does the movie succeed in spite of the voice and the themes about becoming a legend to become so powerful and impact the world the way Batman and these villains do?
I have been super interested in Alan Moore recently and reading Alan Moore interviews. And if y'all know anything about what Alan Moore has been talking about lately, and also his whole career, is that superheroes are inherently fascist, and that it's this fascist propaganda of one man who that you can unite behind that's going to save everyone. And I've always found the Dark Knight trilogy to be very, very guilty of that, despite me still loving, especially the last two movies.
Oh, sure.
No, to that, Jack. I mean, I think the next film that you won't be part of, but I think Interstellar falls victim to that in an interesting way. Single person savior.
Yeah.
But I think what's wild about this film, so this is a post 9/11 film. I would say never forget, but you weren't around to remember. But what they do is to like hide his vigilantism and like how crazy it is that some rich dude's able to beat up criminals in a way to enforce justice, is they have somebody who's even worse than him as your bad person. So you're like, oh, this is the middle ground. It's okay because he's not Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We were Jenny was watching a bit of it with me, and we were talking about how if you didn't know, presume that you walk into the movie having no idea who Batman is, you see him become Batman, but it's never explained. And for a lot of the movie, you might think he was like turning into some sort of mega villain.
Ooh.
But I don't. Obviously, everybody, I was never confused because I knew.
And maybe he kind of is. I don't know if this is actually subtext or not, but it's really interesting to me, his whole going to mysterious Asia land and like learning the ways of a criminal, but you just see him like pulling one box out of the back of a truck. And it's really interesting thinking about this billionaire who, he's had a hard life. His parents got shot in front of him. Whatever. He's still a billionaire, that could easily end up being like Martin Sheen in that movie where he plays an evil 10-year-old Clifford. He could easily turn out to be like that.
Yeah, but I wish it was Martin Sheen.
I wish we saw Christopher Nolan's Clifford.
Yeah. But he could easily be that, but instead he goes to Asia land and then learns how to act like a criminal, and you just picture him being with those people and being like, yeah, these are the people I want to go back home and beat the shit out of. So I really do think he is inherently a fascistic symbol, and that doesn't really bug me because the movies are still good.
You're saying somebody who something terrible happens to and he goes to a jail somewhere and he spends time learning and maybe even writing a book and then comes back.
But a struggle
is bad.
maybe I mean, you know what my struggle sounds, you know what language my struggle sounds the best in?
And yeah, it's funny again with the stupid dialogue how the early parts of this movie go out of their way to make sure that Thomas Wayne is one of the good billionaires.
Yes.
It's almost like
oh my god, he's the
scene
best
of, like,
billionaire in film history.
the
Did you know
Railroad line
wait,
made me laugh
wait,
so
guys.
hard.
Jack, you weren't around for this, but of course your dad and I were. The Underground Railroad was literally underground.
Yeah.
Thomas Wayne he should have a halo. He's so fucking great.
Yeah, there's a
he
scene
also
where-
wait. There's a point. Wait, guys, I just remembered. There's a point where Ra's al Ghul is in Wayne Manor. Bruce Wayne, which Christian Bale, we could talk about his performance being cast off of probably American Psycho, right? Just so fucking good. Where he pretends to be drunk so that he can send away his guests, his sycophants, drinking his free booze. And then Ra's al Ghul's like, we burned London to the ground, and we tried to destroy this city before through economic measures. We never tried it before, but there was one person who fought us, and that was Thomas Wayne. And it's like, what? he built a monorail, and that solved the Great Depression in pseudo Chicago?
And he was such a good guy that he didn't even go to work at the building that he owned. He decided to be a surgeon instead to save people's lives. So fucking stupid.
Dr. Rick Douglas, MD. I didn't need my billions today. There were kids on the kiddie ward that needed saving.
It's pretty bad, and it goes out of its way. The third one, I think, does this better in a more brilliant, absurdist, fantastical fashion, but it also goes out of its way to make sure that there's a separation between the corrupt cops and then the good cops, and same with everyone in the DA's office. It's pretty ridiculous.
Can we get you on the Returns episode, Jack?
On the what?
On the Dark Knight, not the Returns, the Dark Knight Rises. You should.
I would
come
love
through.
to. Yeah.
We watched all three of these movies back to back a number of years ago, and what amazes me about them and what really came through is how Nolan played with Bruce Wayne's character arc from the very starting of Batman Begins to the ending of The Dark Knight Rises, to the point now when I watch Batman Begins, it really feels like the starting of Bruce Wayne's story. And through the crazy stories that he does in all three movies, that he has a really well played and well thought out character arc that feels very satisfying by the time you get to the end. So it's a good thing we're going to watch the last one before we watch the middle one.
What's also interesting about it, I mean, the best one for last, right? What's interesting also is that Nolan would not sign up for another Batman film, until the one that he was working on was done. There was no movie contract or 2-movie contract. Like, it was simply like, and supposedly, according to my sources, the Joker part at the end wasn't meant to say that there was going to be another movie with the Joker in that film as the second film, but rather to symbolize that his journey was complete, and now Batman was the Batman that we kind of think of in our mythology.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, is also probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it links up nicely, and it was probably there a little bit, but I don't like Nolan didn't think. I don't know if you asked Nolan at that time if he thought he was going to do the second one, and if the second one would have the Joker. Like, I think it would be a
That makes
crapshoot.
sense.
I mean, I won't. It was extremely savvy to do what he did because it was the success. He was able to leverage the success of each of his Batman movies into a successful movie that was his IP. I mean, if it wasn't a plan that way, it was just very, very good. If it was truly artistically motivated, it also turned out to be very smart business wise because it made him like the most powerful director in Hollywood to
Yeah.
hold Warner Brothers over a barrel like that. And then obviously he delivered. I mean, those were huge movies. It's not like they regret.
Yeah, and he had to gin up reasons to excite him to make the other ones because he didn't want to just make another Batman movie. I mean, the first one's an origin story, then you have a big old crime epic, and then the third one, the crazy one, is like a big old-fashioned literary epic.
It's like
A historical epic, but told with like superheroes, and I think structurally, Dark Knight Rises might be the most bonkers of all of Nolan's movies, even more than Tenet.
For you.
Citizens of Gotham.
Oh, I'm not looking forward to that one. But I can't remember who Michael Caine I'm sorry, not Michael Caine. Who they originally wanted Gary Oldman to play, but it wasn't Gordon in the film. But
Wasn't he on the list for Raj Al Ghul?
Roz, I think so. I think
Yeah, a lot of
think
people
so.
were.
And
They had to put ninjas on crates in those Leah Shadows scenes because Liam Neeson's so fucking tall. And the scene where it's like, "I'm gonna hide from you, Bruce Wayne." It's like the oldest 6'4" guy in a sea of 5'3" guys.
we never see Liam Neeson in the same shot as Cillian Murphy, right? But-
Hopefully not. Yeah.
My God, it's amazing how, I mean, he's a short king, right? Like, respect. But he is definitely not tall. And it's wild to see Oppenheimer and then turn around and watch this film because they don't try to do any visual tricks. They're like, oh, okay, he's the same height as Holmes.
Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
Can we talk about Katie Holmes a little bit and the fact that Amy Adams was like doing some of the early readings for not rehearsals, the auditions? I don't think she was ever going to be in the movie. But they were so close to having Amy Adams as Rachel Dawes instead of Katie Holmes, who I don't have a problem with Katie Holmes in general. I mean, she's fine in a lot of movies, but here as district attorney, one of those crime-ridden cities in the history of mankind, just trying to keep her moral and ethical head above water. Holy shit, she is fucking terrible.
Hey, here's one. Does DA stand for doesn't act?
This was peak DVD, guys. If you get the DVD, like I did, you also get a comic book with it. It's not full size. It's the size of a comic book in format. But it has like 4 comic book stories in it about Batman. And the special disc, it's set up like a comic book. So you have to like scroll through each page to go to a special feature. And some of the things are like Easter eggs. And when you find an Easter egg, it's that fucking scene where it says "Finders Keepers" as like as a title before you actually get to the dumb thing that they show for 15 seconds that has nothing to do with anything.
You're rubbing salt in the wound, so to speak, because we had a Batman Begins DVD for years, and it mysteriously vanished right before we were going to watch this.
Yeah.
In fact, it might be the same one that you have.
It might be. Although last time I remember opening it and some dust or something came out, and then I put the movie in, and then every character or every actor was replaced by Katie Holmes, and it scared the shit out of me. So I think I may have like burned it with some sage or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember that scaring me when I was a little kid. The scarecrow dust stuff.
Scarecrow's fucking terrifying.
It's great.
Yeah, maggots crawling out of his mask.
Nolan has so much fun with people seeing crazy shit in this. Is terrifying, but in a gleeful, almost early Sam Raimi way,
Yeah.
where it's hard not to just laugh at how creepy it is.
Yeah, good call. For a while, I had this in my zombie section of my collection just because of whatever the hollows. That's not right. The shallows,
Narrows.
the narrows.
Yeah.
The Narrows. Yeah.
When everybody looks like some type of giallo zombie taking over the city moment.
It would be great to see him make a horror movie, a full-on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Narrows in this movie is something that it looks terrible. It doesn't make any sense. But I think it's Nolan's way of conceding, like putting comic book Gotham in his version of Gotham.
Yeah.
And then in the next movie, when they're like, okay, you can do whatever you want, he's like, okay, I'm going to make Heat.
Hey, it's
but with
Chicago.
superheroes. He just makes it's just Chicago.
Yeah.
And they completely ignore that the Narrows or this monorail ever existed.
Well, didn't the Narrows burn down? But also, wasn't the Narrows like 4 people anyway? Because whenever Katie Holmes goes there with the 2 anecdotes that Fox has given Wayne, who gives to her, whenever she wakes up from being date rape drugged by the butler dropping her off at her place, and she was told to give one to Gordon and have the other one be used to manufacture more, and she just gives them both to him. Doesn't say any instructions. Okay. But then immediately after that, the little boy from the fire escape shows up.
Hey.
And then Ra's al Ghul's there. So it's like everybody just like hangs out at this one location in the Narrows, I guess.
Yeah, and Victor Zsasz is there you might know from the comic books.
Yep. He is the identity of the super villain Sassy Sue.
Yes.
Victor Sassy Sue.
Correct.
Yeah, and he's always he's always talking about people and what they're wearing, and it's so withering that it actually physically hurts them.
Wow. It's great stuff.
He's a great superhero.
Yeah. He gets like radioactive shade on him, and then
yeah, DC, hit us up, man. We will write you a new Batman villain that'll totally knock your socks off.
I'm glad that Mark Boone Jr. got some work in this.
Yeah, he's great.
And I like that Gordon isn't a holier than thou person in it, where he's like, look, I'm not going to do it. Right. I'm not going to rat you out. I'm not a rat. I'm not going to, I don't want whatever kickback taste, whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's from the Frank Miller Mazzucchelli Batman Year One, where it really positions Gordon in that awkward spot of being an honest cop, but who has no interest in turning in or ratting out any of his dirty cop cohorts, which is interesting. It's an interesting way to play it. You know, he's not Serpico, and he's also not who's a dirty cop, a famous dirty cop.
No, there's no such thing. Back to Blue.
Oh, Dirty Harry.
He
Because his name's Dirty.
Yes. I'm being namist now. I'm sorry.
The classic Gotham City Police Department that always, for whatever reason, sends in all of their cops into the dangerous location, and then is surprised when they all get trapped there, which happens in this movie and the last one.
Oh, so that scene where he is in Arkham and Katie Holmes is like, oh no, Scientology, and she's zoning out, and then he calls for the fucking bats. I think that might be, it's silly, but I think it might be the most badass scene.
It's amazing
in the Nolan movies, because it's just so fucking cool. It's like all the cops are like turning around and they all have that horror movie face. Like, what is that? And then when they come in and they obscure everything, and then he comes out of the building. Oh, it's fucking great.
Yeah. You have the Boone line before that where he's like, so why aren't you guys going in? He's like, well, it's the Batman. He's like, oh, we'll wait for backup then. And then, you have that where he's just like dropping down because Gordon goes out ahead of him, and then he calls the bats and he's going right behind him. But then it gets to like the most reckless part ever, right? Where he's running through Arkham and he's just like blowing up walls and letting out the prisoners, presumably. Okay. And then he gets into the bat tank and is just fucking destroying things. Of course. So yes, he needs to save Katie Holmes. But unfortunately, like dozens of people die in the
Probably.
process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Batman's whole no-kill philosophy in these movies, and then just objectively killing people. Sometimes collateral damage, and then sometimes
Collateral damage, yeah.
when he blows up the League of Shadows, he's straight up killing people.
Well, he said, I'm not going to kill you. I'm just not going to save you.
What
And
do you
Russell
think
goes
killing
like,
him means?
hang on a second. And then it explodes and the train goes over. He doesn't have time to argue it. And Batman's like, well, I guess I won that argument.
Yeah.
There's a part where he drives that tank thing onto a roof of a cathedral, and the cathedral roof doesn't collapse. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So, Thomas, you did research on this. I'm curious about the special effects utilized because I could definitely see CGI more than maybe any other Nolan.
Well, I think it's only because of the earliness of some of the CGI, but they did try and use as much practical as possible. One of the things that one of the authors pointed out is that in his first 3 films, he uses a lot of insert shots to create a sense of realism in a world that's kind of realistic. And in this, but especially in the next few films when he uses IMAX, it's the idea of scope and realism as much as he can to let a fictional world seem more lived in and realistic. And I think that probably is one of the benefits of Interstellar when we get to it next episode. But in this, they were like they considered for a long time, do we use real bats? And the unfortunate thing about bats, even though Nicolas Cage in Vampire's Kiss was going to run to the park, Central Park, and get one, if you guys remember that part of the episode, they shit all over the place, and they're not really trainable. And so they had to, anything that they were going to do, they really sat down and said, is this better to do not practically? But the cave, they built the cave, and they lit it as much naturalistically as they possibly could. And so
amazing fucking set.
It really is. And so they use very little CGI in this film.
Are the Narrows models?
They are. The Narrows actually built in they took a storage area for to my mind, spacecraft somewhere. It's in Europe, and they built all of the Narrows, and they built it in such a way that you can shoot it from different angles and make it look a little bit bigger. But all those street scenes, all that is taking place in a giant hangar. They built like a few city blocks. I think it was maybe like 8 city blocks. Okay. And they built it as tall up as they could as well. So, that's a wire work whenever you see him pull Boone's character up and down and drop him. Like a lot of this is as practical as possible. They created their own material for the cape because they were originally going to use, I'm not good with my fabrics, but the type of cape that they wanted to use was more of a naturalistic, something you could buy off the rack. And they instead had to like redesign it so they would fold right and look good in different areas, like different. They built that car more or less, like the design of it around an existing frame. So I mean everything, like they did use, unlike in The Name of the King 3, they used very little CGI.
Although it ends the exact same way with a winged creature flying right towards the camera.
That's true. Wait, I'm just thinking about this now. Did Batman even need to be on the train at the end? Because it would have crashed if Gordon blew up the thing, no matter what.
He needed to get rid of the device that's causing the water to evaporate.
Oh, okay. Wouldn't that cause just people to evaporate too? Don't we have a lot of water in us?
Yeah. Don't remember what you said, Jack, about how if you stop and think about any component too long?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, why did they get an hallucinogen that just worked in the water supply?
I must say I do love it's awkward in the story, but the way the sets look and stuff with this kind of half in comic world, half in Nolan James Bond land. I like the subtle phantasmagoric things, and you guys were talking about the horror stuff with the scarecrow and that stuff too, but just the Narrows, it's weird and kind of goofy, but I think it looks cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to you about this last night. This might be the warmest color palette of maybe all of Nolan's movies. Even the main poster of Batman silhouetted in the bats, it's a very warm orange/brown background. And Pfister shoots this really, really warmly, and it's kind of almost an anomaly watching these other Nolans that we've been watching, because the rest of them not so much.
I don't really like the look of this movie, and I think besides the third act being a bit maybe too goofy, the thing that really puts me off is this kind of has a warm, flat look to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely, it's hard not to compare this to The Dark Knight, but when you put them side by side, it's like a whole different league of filmmaking.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a what's that flattening that they do on televisions that kind of like scans around? It's not there exactly, but it definitely has a closer sense to. It looks less like a film than I guess some of the other ones, and a little bit more like television.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even in Insomnia or Memento, his two previous films, which are a lot lower budget. So it was definitely a choice that he and Pfister made for the look of it, that they completely scrapped and rebuilt from the ground up for The Dark Knight, which is interesting because like the Schumachers or the Burtons, they all had a very almost unified color palette and look. It's interesting for someone to make the movie like this and then just completely upend it for the next movie.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, as I think through that, it would make a lot of sense if you were doing a new Batman film and you wanted it to be dark, but you didn't want it to be too dark. You still wanted it to be PG-13. One way to convey that would be to not light it like it's 8mm.
Yeah.
Particularly with all the scary stuff that he's shoving in there, you know?
Yeah. The one of the things that he said was he really wanted to, unlike, like, as much as he liked the Burton films for what they were able to do, it really felt insular and like you were in a bubble and so he really wanted to take this film and go outside and have the city itself as a metropolis in the world, which he does excellently in the next film, right? Or the next of these series.
Yeah.
But I think just getting him, like, even though it's dumb as shit to have him stow away and then go be a criminal in Asia land for some reason, so he knows what a criminal's like. As stupid as that is, it does get you outside of Gotham in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that the QAnon conspiracy that JFK was coming back was partly inspired by Bruce Wayne's journey in this film? He had to go away and do something where people wouldn't recognize him, but then years later he's coming back to save us.
There's a young up-and-comer. Might have heard of him.
Kennington, have you heard the good news? That guy left, okay? He came back too.
Oh, wait. Oh, okay.
30 years, you know?
It's true.
Wait, what guy?
Jesus.
Jesus went away for 30 years?
Yeah.
What?
No, it's like
it's like a couple days.
8 to 33. That's when he was gone. He was he left Israel from 8 and came back at 33.
Oh, so he was like in Asia land doing crimes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then he came back and says, "Okay."
If you want to know the hot fire theory in Catholic dogma land for the past 20 years, it's that Jesus was in India and was actually just a Buddhist, and when he came back, everything got really misinterpreted. He didn't something about the translation went wrong, and he ended up a Messiah and not a Buddha.
Huh.
And that's objectively true.
Yes. He came back as like, I'm gonna get revenge for my father.
Yes.
Jesus, I'm still here.
Do you think the box he stole had God written on the side of it the same way that this one said Wayne Industries, property of God? Oh, that stinky Jesus.
That's a whole different movie, though. Wow. Scorsese's long-rumored teachings of Jesus.
Or Mel Gibson's
The Passions?
Revenge of
Passion
the
2?
Christ.
Yeah. Can't wait. Whew.
Whew.
Didn't Jim Caviezel almost play Batman one time? No, I'm thinking of someone else.
He was Superman. Isn't he in? No, he's not. He was almost Superman, maybe.
No, I don't know. So yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something
So-
like that.
Speaking of Superman, and speaking of next season, and our director for next season to complete this 90s auteur, Bryan Singer had a movie called Superman Returns at the same time, also through Warner Brothers, and was also considered a reboot. And
I thought
one of the books I was reading through, it said was, unlike, so there's a pretty interesting divergence between the takes that Singer decides to have and Nolan decides to have in their material, where Singer tried to reconnect it to the roots, taking the production design, plot points, and footage even of Brando from Superman 1 and 2 to create Superman Returns.
Mhm.
And it was trying to like glorify the past and trap it in amber, is what this person wrote. The belated follow-up fetishizes the earlier Superman films, whereas the Nolan film in Batman Begins makes a clear break with what came before in order to rebuild its central character from the ground up. And that was the reason that people rejected Superman Returns.
And I know
I
the
think
Superman
so.
1 and 2 are well regarded, but as somebody who read an ad for how terrible Lethal Weapon 2 is for Panscan, Richard Donner was a terrible director, and I will go on record saying that,
Whoa.
Your Honor.
I
Madam
like
Secretary.
the Superman, but it's that's one of those ones that imprinted on me when I was like 4. So,
But I mean, the whole idea of building up those Superman films as something that cannot be touched, and the only way you could do it, fucking ridiculous.
yeah,
So,
I agree. And I was also really in the bag for Superman Returns. I was very excited with Singer doing it and everything. And to your point, Thomas, I liked the design and everything, and I didn't mind that it was so Donner-esque because I liked the original movie. But then when I found out that the plot was exactly the same, that's when I just totally checked out of that movie. It was like, oh, well, and they had the kid thing at the end. That was actually, they saved the coolest thing about it for the sequel that never happened. Don't do that, Jack. When you get your superhero trilogy, I want you to leave it out on the field the first time. Don't save. Don't save anything for the second one. I will, if we make a vow not to cover a Singer, then I will share with you the story that I have about Singer and the creation of the giant, and the giant with the giant baby head, the dumb giant with the tiny
We already
head.
know this story, so yeah.
Damn it.
So you can't use that as leverage. All right, so next week we'll be covering Usual Suspects and
Usual Suspects, Kevin
Bohemian
Spacey, Bryan
Rhapsody.
Singer. What?
Oh, I
Well,
forget
same
his
thing with
name
Superman
is on
Returns.
Bohemian Rhapsody. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's a film he was fired from. I mean, you also have Singer and Spacey in Superman Returns.
Yeah.
I wonder what they talked
So
about.
if we can go back to Batman, I know we've been talking about this movie for a while, but I guess I didn't gauge everybody around the table of your interest in Batman from like either comic books or cartoons when you were young, and how baked in you were as a Batman fan from an early age or not. Thomas?
I guess I was a Marvel kid. Wolverine, like this is before Wolverine was even bigger, as big as he would become in the early 90s, like from late 80s. I was really into Wolverine and Daredevil. But of the DC superheroes, Batman was my go-to.
Ryan?
I didn't read the comics. I did grow up watching the 66 show with my dad, and I liked the Burton movies, but they were a little, I was like 10 when the first one came out, so they were a little scary for me still. I think I really liked Batman, and that must be because of the animated series.
Yeah.
Jack?
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, I grew up watching the Justice League Unlimited animated show, and Yeah, I was a huge Batman fan. He was always my favorite.
Yeah,
Ken?
I was a big Batman fan from the I guess early '80s when he kind of became DC's master technician.
Tactician.
Yeah, with like Batman and the Outsiders, and he kind of became more of a overlord type mentor. And then when Frank Miller came around and the books got gritty, I was a big fan of. I guess my first Batman artist was Jim Aparo, who it's like your first James Bond. Whichever cartoonist drew him that you encountered him first kind of becomes your definitive version of him. So I always think of him that way. Yeah, I was a big fan up until, I don't know, I grew out of comic books and cartoons like a normal adult. Sorry, nerds.
Had it happened?
Yes, last week.
Okay. Lost the internet and you lost your nerdom.
The Marvel Unlimited subscription went away.
I guess the whenever I was growing up, the Superman movies, the Donner Superman movies were seen as kind of like the pinnacle of of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, there was Darkman, of course, there's Howard the Duck. But and then when Burton came around with Batman, it was like a big fucking deal in the idea of like being able to put a superhero on film. And then it seemed like the Schumachers kind of hung around, like they came out and they were for a certain subset of teenage boy, maybe, and nipple enthusiasts.
Well, yeah.
And then it kind of like almost died, or it did die, and then X-Men came out. And that showed that you could do a superhero film that was a little bit more realistic.
Uh-huh.
I heard some folks talking about video game adaptations, and one made a great point that until Bryan Singer's X-Men, comic books, any nerd property, it was how do we turn this pre-existing narrative into something that makes sense as a movie, like a pre-existing
Super Mario
genre.
Brothers.
Yeah, and that the more, well, they brought up this point that the more you try and turn a comic book or a video game into something that resembles a Hollywood traditional narrative, you get a mutation like Super Mario Brothers, because they have to try and explain why there are reptiles, and they just get way too confused. But X-Men was the first time, according to this person, that it was like they just let the property be about silly people wearing costumes and trying to save the world, and didn't try and make it more than that.
Well, I think he had Fantastic Four before that, right? Like not the newer ones, but the
The Roger Corman one?
Yeah.
Good point, Thomas.
And you had like it was a Japanese Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that one's great.
But yeah, I think there's something like you have the wire technology and enough CGI that you can make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're covering Bryan Singer next season.
No, we're not.
I don't know if we talked about it. Did you guys like watching the movie again?
Batman Begins? Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's more interesting watching it within the context of these other movies. I think like structurally, and watching the early Nolans morphing into something that he would become, much like Batman and Bruce Wayne. Found it much more interesting, but the same problems I had when I first saw it. It's like the ending of the movie is pretty stupid. The first 45 minutes to hour are fucking great.
I actually, we all know that I love some goofy shit. I don't mind the ending. The movie totally comes to a stop when they get in that fucking 4x4 Batmobile thing and start breaking shit up. But then it's just like, what are we? And the movie stops for 10 minutes so everybody can go, what a fucking cool tank car.
And also so that cops can be having some jokes.
Yeah, they do get
What's
some
it
good
look
jokes in
like?
there. Yeah.
Yeah, cops aren't all that bad.
What, you guys don't like falafel?
Falafel in the Rain is a great emo song.
I was about to say, that was our first album, wasn't it, kid?
Falafel in the Rain. We run out of things to say about Batman Baggins.
Well, there is a little bit of pop psychology here, or symmetries that are kind of interesting in that you have Crane, Scarecrow, as a psychiatrist, who's so you have Batman going up against a psychiatrist, right? And he's going up against his fear, as Ryan talked about earlier, and having to encounter it. But also, he's definitely. I mean, the thing I saw a little bit more in this time watching it is that it's pretty heavy-handed that Bruce Wayne is looking for a father figure, and before we know he's Ra's al Ghul, whatever his name he's going by at the time,
Ducard.
Liam Neeson is thank you.
That was pretty good.
Liam Neeson is his family has been he's estranged from him at least, and so he's looking for a surrogate son, and so there's something more going on between the two of them instead of just training to whatever they're doing, like become vigilantes that could take out a city, whatever the stupid thing is that they're doing on the mountain in the ice on the glacier with the hallucinogens and ninjas. There is something a little bit more there. So that, this Bruce Wayne, he does need to come into his own and get past living in his dad's shadow.
Yeah, because he is pulled from more than one father figure. It's the classic young man having multiple authority figures pulling him in different directions. He eventually goes the way to Sir Michael Caine.
Whoa, is he in the studio?
Also good.
I'm not going to do Morgan Freeman, though.
I always thought the subtext was Batman's fighting a psychologist, because if they sat down and talked, he would immediately diagnose him as crazy.
Yeah, Batman would be in there crazy like Wilkeson, and they go, "You dose him, didn't you?" And Scarecrow would be like, I didn't have to.
That's interesting when you say that, Jack. Because in this one, it's like he's going up against a psychologist, and then in the next one, it's someone who is as crazy as he is, and then in the third one, it's someone who's crazier than he is.
Whoa.
Just like Rocky.
Yeah, I know Nolan is a fan of Rocky 3 as being one of the only good thirds, and one of the things he thought about before making the third Batman movie. Maybe we'll talk about that. No, seriously.
Is that true?
Yeah, that was one of the movies. That was one of the movies he mentioned. Like most films that have a third, the third one usually isn't very good. And the example he brought up is Rocky 3, which is fucking great. Give me a break. Clubber Lang. Come on.
Yeah.
I guess the one last thing I have is, here's a take. It feels like a take Ryan might have, so maybe he'll enjoy it a little bit more than I did.
I'm going to turn on the microwave. Let's go. Let's get it popping.
So this is I've talked about him before. The book's Christopher Nolan. It's it's by Darren Mooney, and he says basically, like Johnny G in Memento, Batman is not real or tangible in any sense until the protagonist literally constructs him. So what he's basically goes on to say is this film is very much like Memento in that the protagonist creates a fiction that he then starts to have to believe in. In Memento, he's surrounded by corrupt people, by the cop, by Trinity, who turn him in the wrong direction when he creates a fiction for himself to believe in. But in Batman Begins, he has nurturing people like Gordon and his butler and Lucius Fox to lead him into the beneficial, the benevolent side of fantasy and believing in fictions. Wow. And that just seems like somebody's trying to write a term paper.
I mean, nurturing or enabling.
So, Ryan, you'll like this. One of the movies he wanted the crew and cast to watch before they made this, be like, well, this is what we're doing here, was Ridley Scott's Blade Runner.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, okay, a really beautiful but boring and inert piece of art that is a commercial failure.
Yeah. I wish we would have gotten the Ridley Scott Batman Begins. Whew.
Oh my God. I always got to end it on a sour note.
One last thought that I had. I always think of this film as long. And then I look back, and all of the films, the first two at least, were over 2 hours long, the Burton films. And so it's amazing how much Nolan can pack into a film and still have a stupid, too long last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get to that when you cover The Dark Knight, but The Dark Knight has maybe the most scenes of any movie I've ever seen at that length.
Yeah.
Oh, it does not stop.
Yeah, it's constantly cutting to the next scene. Sometimes multiple next scenes within a scene.
Well, yeah. I mean, by Tenet and Oppenheimer, I mean, he doesn't even need scenes anymore.
It's
It's just like,
transcended that.
yeah, 2 lines of dialogue and then you're
He's
someplace new.
transcended.
It is pretty incredible from a film technique point of view that location and time are like the two things that you can theoretically you should be able to mess with the most, but a lot of directors have a hard time doing so effectively, and he's like nailed those things. He can he can flash you backwards and forwards in time, and it never feels jarring.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that in the other episodes.
Yeah.
Nolan, as a writer, is interested in things that most modern screenwriters aren't interested in, as far as storytelling goes.
Yeah, and this seems like a good Batman Begins seems like a good opening thesis statement for that for him as a director, at least with these huge budget blockbuster ones. Because the first 45 minutes really is that, and then it moves on to something a little more conventional.
This is totally him breaking onto the scene. This is his big moment, and to nail it to the degree he did is pretty impressive. While also maintaining a lot of the Christopher Nolan stuff that we've been talking about for all the other movies. It feels like a Christopher Nolan movie, even if some of it is artistically compromised for some of the commercial stuff he had to put in there. But
I always
it still feels like a Nolan movie.
I always think that it's in this film, and it's not. It's in the next one. But Batman is the detective. And I think that's the thing that I was missing in this film. And I was excited for whenever I heard it was going to be Nolan, is I thought he was going to have a little bit more detectiving in it.
We're thinking of this as kind of like planting a flag. I don't think it was really until I've always been surprised that he turned out to be a big action director, from being so into Memento, and then it felt like at the time this was like a funny suit he was wearing so that he could go off and do other things later. And so when Inception came out, and then now Tenet, and he's really doubled down on this, like, I am the maestro of action. Like, there's not even, besides the chase in Memento, there's not even really very much there, that would suggest that was something that he was really gonna delve deep into.
You mean the chase in Insomnia?
Even just in Memento, there's the very brief foot chase, which is like the only kind of like action-y scene in that movie, and it is short. The Insomnia one is much more a put together version of kind of the same thing. But
yeah, the log scene in Insomnia feels like it should be in a Batman film.
Yes,
that'd be fucking cool.
It's so good.
Yeah. So that was part one of our 2-part Batman Begins Interstellar mashup.
Yeah. Well, if you stick around, you can join us next week when this episode comes out, or when the next episode comes out. It's all timey-wimey.
Yeah, it might have already come out.
Whoa.
It's interstellar. There's gravity, dimensions. It'll land when it lands.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
wonderful to talk to you.
Thanks for joining us, Jack, and thanks to Weird AI, also known as Ryan.
Hey.
Woo! For the theme
song.
Yeah.
Of course, follow us on the social medias. You know what they are. But if I could just talk to our listener for a moment. We've had offers from a mattress company, a remote mental health service, a food delivery service. But these 3 different firms had strict policies on advertising on podcasts. Namely, they expressed that The Good, the Pod, the Ugly have at least 2 subscribers/followers to our podcast. So, listener, if you have a friend or, I don't know, a second device that you use, go ahead and subscribe to us again, or have them subscribe to us. Or, hey, maybe you're not our listener. Maybe you're somebody who accidentally came across The Good, the Pod, the Ugly, looking for the Groot, the Paw, the Pad, the Glee, where we cover Ultimate Alliance 3's video games Guardian of the Galaxy's tree character and then play the soundtrack from 6 seasons of Glee. And if you've made it this far, go ahead and just subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It keeps us free from having to beg at the end of every episode for more subscribers, which we will start to do until we're able to pitch remote health services or mattresses or all those other things that you do not have enough of. Socks, special pills to take at night for your boner or for your sleep or for both. So subscribe.
Please do. PanScan's money is not going to go far. I already spent it on this can of beer I've been nursing the entire episode.
And it's a natty light.
What do you think? I'm a high roller? Thanks, guys. I'm really looking forward to Interstellar.
This is where I say to you, Ken, I never said thank you. And you tell me, and you'll never have to.
Okay, let's start over again. I just edit out the first part.
Ken, I never said thank you.
For what?
Oh, boy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
You know what that makes us together? Together, that makes us flash gorgeous.
Flash gorgeous.
I'm not talking at you. I'm talking to you.
Flash gorgeous.
I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear from you.
It's 10-4.
10-4, buddies. Destroy. Kill all hippies.
I don't hate it. I just don't know why you're straight from the formula.
You bastards! You don't know it, Bob. I'm an artist! And I must reflect that in my rhyme.
Because hard times and economic disparity.